The night her family was taken from her, her life changed forever. It was a night like any other, filled with the familiar sounds of the village settling down, the crackle of fires, and the low hum of conversation. But then, unfamiliar noises shattered the peace shouts, screams, and the terrifying clang of metal. She was just a girl, hiding in the shadows, watching as figures she had known her entire life were dragged from their homes. In the chaos, she lost sight of her mother, her father, her brothers. That was the last time she ever saw them. Her world, once safe and small, had been irrevocably broken. At 14, she was forced to leave her village, not knowing she would never return. The morning after the raid was eerily silent. The people who had taken them were efficient, their movements practiced. They gathered the survivors, a terrified group of men, women, and children, and tied their hands. As they were marched away, she looked back one last time, trying to burn the image of her home into her memory. The huts, the ancient baobab tree at the center of the village, the path leading to the river. She held onto a sliver of hope that she might one day come back, that this was all just a terrible nightmare. But deep down, a cold dread told her that her past was now a ghost. By sunrise, the place she called home no longer existed, and she was already in chains of fate. The journey began immediately. The sun rose over a horizon she had never seen before, casting long shadows of the captive line snaking through the savannah. The chains were not just physical, they were a symbol of a new reality. Her identity was being stripped away with every step she took away from her homeland. The life she was supposed to have, marriage, children, growing old among her people, was gone. In its place was a terrifying uncertainty, a future dictated entirely by the whims of her captors. She was no longer a daughter or a villager. She was property. In Kano, a bustling trading hub, she discovered how easily a human being could be exchanged. The city was a sensory overload, a whirlwind of sounds, smells, and colors she had never imagined. Crowds of people speaking languages she didn't understand pushed through narrow streets filled with merchants selling spices, textiles, and salt. And among these goods, she and the others were put on display. It was here, in the heart of a great city, that she witnessed the cold mechanics of the slave trade. She learned that a person's worth could be measured in cowrie shells or bolts of cloth. It was a brutal lesson in dehumanization. Strangers inspected her in silence, deciding her future without ever asking her name. Potential buyers would walk up to her, their faces impassive. They would open her mouth to check her teeth, feel her arms and legs to gauge her strength, and turn her around as if she were a piece of livestock. Their eyes held no empathy, only calculation. It was a deeply humiliating experience, a violation that went beyond the physical. In those moments, she felt completely invisible, her spirit shrinking under their cold, appraising gazes. Her name, her thoughts, her fears, none of it mattered. All that mattered was her price. Somewhere on the road to Timbuktu, her birth name stopped being used. Her captors had never bothered to learn it, giving her a new, simpler name that was easier for them to pronounce. At first, she resisted, silently clinging to the name her parents had given her, the name that connected her to her heritage. But as the days turned into weeks, the constant use of the new name began to wear her down. The other captives, too, were being renamed. It was another layer of control, another way to erase their pasts and sever their connections to who they once were. Her birth name became a secret she whispered to herself in the dark, a final, fading ember of her old life. The caravan moved slowly across the desert, following routes used for centuries. They joined a much larger procession, a long line of camels and people stretching to the horizon, heading north. This was a trans-Saharan trade route, an ancient network that had carried gold, salt, and, for countless souls like her, misery. The journey was grueling. The days were scorching hot, the sun a relentless hammer in the sky. The nights were freezing cold, offering little respite. The endless expanse of sand was hypnotic and terrifying, a vast, empty canvas that swallowed all hope. The Sahara offered no shelter, no mercy, and no second chances. The desert was an unforgiving master. Water was strictly rationed, just enough to keep them alive. Food was a meager portion of grains. Many fell ill from exhaustion, dehydration, or disease. There was no stopping for the weak. Those who could no longer walk were left behind, their fate sealed by the shifting sands. The sheer brutality of it was staggering. She learned to conserve her energy, to endure the pain, and to shut down her emotions just to survive. The desert stripped everything away, leaving only the raw, desperate will to live. Each day, fewer voices answered when the guards counted. The morning roll call became a grim ritual. The guards would walk down the line, counting the captives. Every day, the number was smaller. A person who had walked beside her yesterday would be gone today. There were no goodbyes, no moments of mourning. Their absence was just a new, empty space in the line. She saw the toll the journey was taking, not just on their bodies, but on their spirits. The light in people's eyes dimmed, replaced by a vacant stare. The desert was claiming them, one by one. When they reached Tripoli, on the coast of the Mediterranean, the sea felt distant and unreachable. After months in the desert, the sight of a city and the smell of the sea should have been a relief. But Tripoli was just another market, another place of sale. The vast blue expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, shimmering under the sun, represented a world she would never know. For her, it was not a symbol of freedom or adventure, but another barrier, the edge of a continent she was being forcibly removed from. It was the gateway to a new, unknown chapter of her enslavement. Across the water, she was sold again in Cairo, this time under official supervision. The market in Cairo was even more organized, more bureaucratic than the others. There were clerks with documents, officials who stamped papers, and a process that gave the transaction a veneer of legitimacy. She was sold into a wealthy household, a place of opulent courtyards and silent corridors. The exchange was swift and impersonal. A man she had never met paid a sum of money, signed a document, and became her new master. The system was so efficient, so normalized, that it was chilling. Her childhood ended quietly, with papers signed and coins exchanged. There was no single dramatic moment, just a slow, grinding erosion of her spirit. Looking back, she realized her childhood had vanished that first night in her village. But here in Cairo, the finality of it all settled in. The signed papers were the official record of her new status. The coins were the price of her life. She was now part of a household, with assigned duties and a rigid routine. The playful, curious girl from a small African village was gone forever, replaced by a silent, obedient slave. Years passed, marked only by routine, obedience, and silence. Her life fell into a monotonous rhythm. Wake before dawn, perform her chores, serve the family, and collapse into sleep at night. She learned to be invisible, to anticipate needs without being asked, to speak only when spoken to. Silence became her shield and her prison. She rarely spoke of her past, as there was no one to share it with. The memories became dreamlike, distant and hazy. The passage of time was marked not by seasons or celebrations, but by the endless cycle of daily tasks. It was a life lived in the margins, in the quiet spaces of a world that was not her own. Even when her circumstances changed, her past could not be recovered. Decades later, through a turn of events she never expected, she was granted her freedom. She was an old woman by then. But freedom was a strange and complicated concept. Where would she go? Her village was gone, her family lost. The world she had been stolen from no longer existed for her. The language of her people felt foreign on her tongue. The chains were gone from her wrists, but the weight of her past remained. She was free, but she was also adrift, a ghost of a life that had been brutally interrupted. Her story was never recorded, but countless others lived the same fate. She died in a city that was not her home, speaking a language that was not her own. Her name, her journey, her suffering, it was all lost to history, like a footprint in the desert sand. Yet, her story is not unique. It is the silent, unwritten story of millions of men, women, and children whose lives were stolen by the slave trade. Their individual experiences are largely forgotten, but their collective legacy is woven into the fabric of our modern world. By remembering one, we honor them all. Thank you for listening.